Parenting Desire, a podcast series on how to circumvent desire rivaling by Nicholas Sakellariou. Episode 1, Back to School. What if desire, previously interpreted sensationally to indicate a passion contradicting an insight, parochially made sense no more? What if sense-making, proximately regarded an instrument bringing physical reference to those in search for insight confirming belief, brought a remark no less? By God, as a result of both remarking an outcome of search and interpreting longing in favor of seeing with one's eyes, comes a sense of having guilt for feeling passionate. Contriving to learn beyond blaming crave for what it dictates, you justify a canon in approaching belief like praise of the senses. I am talking about belief to describe an approach to certainty with reference to indulging whatever desire. In addition, the priority indicated by believing is exactly what desire rivaling will show. No one sound may feel prioritizing where there is someone confusing a desire as directing attention to places where learning is about what one can read. In exaggerating desire intolerance, behavioral moderation lessens impulse personal blaming to whoever attends satisfaction about body seduction. In theory, prioritizing sensational abstinence bypasses enduring confusion. In practice, undoing the temporary esoteric intolerance is setting the perpetual tribute to exchange parochial literature with evidence observing. I am hence inviting all the listeners of this crave observing tribute, everybody determined to proceed with undoing desire rivaling, to go back to school. Going back to school means you learn in practice, because anything incorporated in theory, claiming whatsoever, applies to armchair philosophy. I refer to desire as I learn to invite all beliefs. I present my will as I do what my body casts. A blending of praise and prose of desire begins. A compelling memoir of unprecedented clarity and esteem, childhood is the sole self-revealing period that for all of us our desires come about literally in the form of pronouncements as either praise or prose. Think about all those non-praising sounds made when infuriated parents say "do not" to their children. Parenting, it is commonly assumed, lends itself to encouragement bolstering as long as what is encouraged favors neither the pleasure nor the belief of the child. Hence, any decrease in a child's pleasure and belief can be removed insofar as they behave selfishly, by which I am not saying anybody who has a child requesting them a praise for anything be ready to sound encouraging. I am saying, however, in questioning the way that our long-held idea to parent our children intolerantly of their self-esteem can by any means justify application, that desire marks the beginning of answering the question. Should I evidently pronounce I permit that? What this podcast series is based upon is the common experience that treating any pleasurable sense intolerantly, by commanding thus orders to stay away from them, brings about responses that not only escalate in confusion, but also trigger resentment. Contrary to having a longing pleasure of those who stay with me withdrawn, if I say to someone, "I do praise all you endear," I solely declare that I stand by them no matter their fulfillment. Not to, under any circumstances, say, "I will condone to forever do everything asked for me because I am so expected," stands for never letting someone else state in my name a cause sounding unacceptable. The reason you expect from those by your side to condone, should you endear anything notwithstanding their acceptance, surmises unapprovingly. In order for me to be with you, you need to please my demand no matter what I stand for. By you tellingly removing selfish, self-appreciating in essence endorsements of sympathy, instead of bringing yourself beside whoever passionately turns a caring cheek, you sound unwelcoming. When you indeed claim sympathy for the one person sitting next to you, the unconditional pleasure of involving yourself with them has nothing to do with anybody else. When, however, one person is selfishly letting anybody who decides to, by application of their will, assume an idea about themselves, such person is simply being tolerant of another condition in the name of somebody else. For somebody listening or reading my praise, private communication, to be shared in demand between my correspondents and myself, consists empirically of a series of parenting assumptions that reduce the extent by which praising of desire makes any reference to whatever theory. Regardless of whether you are a reader of my book or a listener of my podcast, prioritizing suggests making a choice based on private search. Such intention that cannot be imposed, I insist on describing as intuitive, because for my correspondents, all learning begins as an exciting discovery. As for caring, something to be assumed by anybody who learns to undo their desire rivaling, parenting desire assumes no theory about. Particularly reducing one parochially told state, mindfulness is key. I recommend abstaining from evidently distracting circumstances. A reason to commemorate such recommendation is parochially appointed behaviors lose sense without stimulating the mind, not exciting it knowingly. I am telling you to reduce blaming yourself for having desires, which is a reaction to condoning the mindset of pity for resenting a choice that you made. Mindfulness is the same choice with not applying my tolerance to those who bring themselves either apart from or on top of my ideas and blaming my affiliate for their action based on the standing that they hold. It is not my mindfulness inducing the sense of being affiliated to my close beholders, but my caring for their unique situation by which I place myself in their vicinity. This is how an idea one stands for discontinues preventing them from endearing all. By endearing somebody, you realize the recommendation of this approach. Bystanders approving anything is irrelevant to encouragement. Placing anybody's contradicting stance at the extreme of your approval, inasmuch as forbidding unjust circumstances, liberates a part of self into confidence no matter what everybody else finds pleasing. By emptying your thoughts from a parochial condition, this caste steadily accrues, joining an effort about prioritizing your desired destination, assumed with steadily realizing your pronouncements. By now you should feel I'm sounding the sensationalist tone, neither to raise any consideration of empirical learning on someone's esteem, nor as a gesture of treating forbidding desire. Selfishly stands as the exact opposite of unapprovingly. This is then the meaning of parenting, as well as the reason why I am referring to undoing desire rivaling instead of undoing self-indulging. Introducing so relevant of a concept to my treatment of desire testifies to the most empirically compelling statement of the entire series, which I will share along with my views on self-indulgence. It is by immediate juxtaposition that parenting of children and parenting of desire reveal not too much of a similarity, although soon that parallel in fact reveals itself fully once one can juxtapose their priorities to their immediate reality. Arriving to the main provocation of praising desire takes time, because it requires casting an idea of assuming parenthood with respect to raising your children and adapting it early on to your outmost desires. For this reason, my most comprehensive invitation will be to those of you that feel the pleasing juxtaposition between the degree to which you say you do what you want and the degree to which you actually mean it. Self-made sound, your own music, proves your determination and breaks the confines made by others between self and esteem. You may still confine your outmost desires unapprovingly, but you may not yet trust such full-fledged adaptation, stigmatizing anything satisfying. It is time, I insist, to provoke those who fully admit they could leave their immediate theory that makes no sense to replace it with a practice of listening to themselves. I entitled my podcast as such because the sound of intuitive upbringing, still interfering enticingly with those who assume a caring position selfishly, can in fact seduce anybody. One is not self-taught unless that person is the believer who sees. I am honored to invite you to this all-inclusive listening cast whose title, Parenting Desire, the listener must, before they approach, literally treat as a call to come closer to pronouncing their intolerance for having to withhold a desire of theirs despite believing the opposite. I am Nicholas Sakellariou, your premiering host of what is going to be a 7-segment series emitted bi-weekly, partly independent and partly in conjunction with my new book titled Jesus Does Yoga, an autobiography. A transcript of this podcast, which is available for you to access on my website, nicholasdoesyoga.com, will make apparent the complete independence between the essential aspect of delivering a podcast, which is the acquisition of a confiding sound, and the annotating within a page of a book whose purpose is to educate about a process that you cannot resonate with without attending as an annotator yourself. The main difference, as a result, between the book and the podcast is a matter of physical attendance. By which I mean the aim of Parenting Desire is to invite my listeners to follow through the episodes evidentially. Those having already made an effort to undo desire rivaling through the book, this podcast supports in terms of applying the 3 principles of Jesus Does Yoga to fundamental aspects of treating burning crave. Besides, for those who, for the first time as listeners, are thus introduced to crave parenting, thinking that repeatedly letting go of doing what they want makes them standing on their feet, this first episode features a surprise to look into. To methodically undo desire rivaling, instead of self-blaming, for realizing potential you construe an examination of caliber. Instead of turning down the invitation calling to juxtapose who you are with who you would like to be, question, should blaming or encouraging be the first reaction to having a desire? Replying by fully attesting your courage to that enigma experientially proves all desires feature an automatic turn-by-turn application to upbring the person holding pressure within them. Removing against their will a desire from their appetite violently leads anybody to compress their emotions. Such is the main difference between having a privately not thrilling appetite while expressing the opposite and joining the others at the table only when you desire, benefiting from a dish right in front of you. By contrast, the main difference between being honest while sounding like you have personal taste and condescending somebody else's appetite is not exonerating the pressure to show your fealty. The difference, however, between somebody who's intolerant to being infatuated and whoever converts their obviously corresponding excitement is that tampering one's physical staleness bystanders will not necessarily perceive. To be privately honest about identifying confinement, although insincere publicly, makes sense for upbringing lends itself to approaching expectations that others possess about you indifferently. The difference between telling yourself honestly to depart from exhibiting another tormenting impulse and featuring theoretically caring individuality, condoning that is your self-interest, is the pleasure you feel when you accomplish self-care. To undo, therefore, exclaiming oneself, whatever titular prose that does not serve anybody, my Appreciative of Sinister Effort podcast is featuring a title as such. In the book, but also in this podcast, I define sinister rather surprisingly, some might conclude, as with all my heart. It should, notwithstanding, by no means surprise my audience that this is a far more adequate definition than the one typically attributed to the term. Expanding the coronary invaluable form around the heart, the left artery is the parameter necessitated as competence on a parent. To be held imprisoned, incapacitated by pessimism due to retaliation, designates an attitude that forbids to decide selfishly. In exchange for a tormented personal resignation which is impossible to mediate to reverse someone's self-deprecating pronouncement, parenting desire invites you to bestow by sensible courage an effort to first affiliate and then exonerate immediately whatever appetite. My forensically enigmatic stating so of immediately has no bearing on the time-sensitive aspect of caring for undoing desire rivaling, since searching regards not immediacy but an estimate about ongoing scrutiny that is somatically mediated. As long as you appreciate your body, regarding it favorably, not strangely, infatuation does not personally affect you. Parenting desire holds a systematic way to compare each season of stabilizing crave seduction with one another, so long you begin to explore an apprehension pulverizing training. Training, reserved for exercise expression, expedites seasonal coverage of commitment to self-care. My recovery plea, nevertheless, is one of not simply reducing, but also doing justice to the strength of sequencing your efforts when sensible signs reveal themselves, notably self-acknowledgement of your volition. The relationship between augmenting self-esteem and alleviating somatic risks will be determined periodically by presuming intuition as tormenting experience interferes with continuation of the same training. Renovating the excitement of experiencing anything has to start with favoring compassion. Before establishing a distance from disorienting parochial conditions, to augment someone's caliber, the idea of impractical standing must be abandoned. Benefiting from such practice will depend favorably on recognizing courage in doing the antinomous of what the theory dictates. For the first time in the history of experimentation, the history of believing in physical manipulation without seeing, both the experimenter and their audience had to undo the void between one another, but also to make amends for the actual void existing. The existence of it manifested itself to the skeptical experimenter as encountering of a new sign-in dimension. By not being present to witness themselves how determining proof of captivating upbringing material was happening, having registered lower standing on top of the tube, contestants challenged whether it was effectively possible to prognose happenstance of evacuation. Targeting the plenty rebuttals, experimenters appealed it was not minimizing volume, but predominantly an increase of the material's velocity, which suggested certification of undeniable proof. It was by achieving constant replication they had been affirming projected evidence, meaning they needed to find an appeal for measuring the righteousness or revealing an allocation that would guarantee anyone's applause. Meticulously looking about what conditional, atmospheric, or other external nuisance negated allocation triggered a search for condensed symptoms synchronous to the outer complexity. An astute audience, therefore, had to find a new way of understanding that recognition of an agreement between themselves and the experimenters was consolidating. They started believing in a fascinating revelation of compound longevity inside the air pump. However embarrassing and uncomfortable it must have been, because of the expectations to approvingly read what provoked the elevation, consuming a significant proportion of their sight, for the reasonable reader of their correspondence, the experimenter suddenly qualified for a compelling storyteller. The pivotal moment they realized levitating the void inside a compartment became the essence of the experiment, the experimenters concluded ecstatically there was consistency of capturing to not be held exclusive to them. To undo the crave battling of the reverent but unsatisfied, I suggest a corresponding test for expelling blame so as to negate pretending you live life fully. For whoever lives their life pretending they hold in a selfish view, the entirety of corresponding visual deterrence collapses in acknowledgement of unsatisfying nonsense. Parenting desire hence begins neither with sacrificing nor with condoning your self-interest. A problem this theory transcending setting for undoing obedience parochially creates regards sketching consumption of valor as disagreement that consists from having a physical demand the mind portrays stationary. By contrast, consistently transmitting a force of regulation, consoling and calibrating the nervous system, the techniques detailed in Jesus Does Yoga are contributing to letting go of theoretical distortion to remember the value of aesthetics. Lost appetite, preventing whoever thinks their body improperly from seeing underneath the sun, is so amended while giving up ideas for approaching insight compassionately. To observe in person serves those who, excluding speculation, value reason to afford analysis. By application of anybody's independent prism, it is possible to steer the exciting, elegant component that pertains to liberating someone, but also care for the simple solution to reject schooling for prioritizing their lives. Treacherous sentiments arise from considering involuntary reduction of satisfying crave a symbol of preventing discomfort, whereas parenting desire makes longing the emblem of prioritizing. For the first time in the history of measurement, seeing became a question of recording amassing private notes transcending all local conditions. In this podcast, I discuss the option of bypassing transgression, considering the second most important strategy for an experimenter of desire is to not violently treat an excitement. The first strategy, collecting evidence, has not been easy when the searcher misses how to conduct it. The most telling example is the desire to having their own way. Documenting parochially how to restore their self-esteem makes them undergo a castigation rather than a leniency marathon. The upbringing rhythm of parenting desire cannot play out unless a difficult, presumably unattainable dilemma is settled in advance, for which my next episode is set. Does fear suggest intolerance rather than tolerance of infatuation? Caring is media-sensed, this episode argued. In the second episode, I will speak about how to learn to care incrementally so for oneself. By neither blaming nor pardoning a desire, but by instead emphasizing an admonition to theorize no more, the sinister purpose of parenting is to recall an exciting experience. Prolonging retaliation, unless an empirical training evades myopic accusation, stales someone inasmuch as a congregation of theorists stales discovery. A gentle, not convoluted clarification is therefore brought to the table. Complacency guarantees stating exquisiteness, not pardon. Prioritizing, doing justice to voluntarily upbring your enjoyment for life, self-praise delivery makes sound. Resurrecting competence to invigorating personal excitement has to occur not by some choice of others that decided for you which pleasure you should accept and which you should resist, but by the leading, honest desire of maintaining a sense of place in all that you do, the sympathy for the parent. Based on such exciting pronouncement, it is crave satisfaction, not desire rivaling, to be placed on trial. A theory of parenting cannot do what passionate practice has undone. Such was my therapy affirmation governing this episode. All self-indicating efforts, the 7 techniques described in my book, are meant as learning approximates escalating individually. First, you insist on praising whatever your personal taste is issuing. Subsequently, you affirm what sounds appealing to you. The riveting, repeatedly astonishing care you demonstrate is the reason why prioritizing turns out simplified so, bypassing ignorance which issued contaminating remorse. Nothing has the capacity to provoke as many times in your life as you care the ability to see crystal clear the way of courage does. Constantly apologizing to someone or blaming yourself for wanting enough satisfaction leads to severing excitement, unreasonably negotiating impractical deliberations. For the next episode, to be aired in 2 weeks from today, a title that corresponds to figuring how to endear bravery is called for. I will be suggesting accepting, not postponing independence in advance of blocking experience. Nobody intolerant to private contemplating sees longing courageously. Until then, I respect not just the ones who praise their desires, but also the ones who do not.